Welcome back to America Decides. Some of former President Trump's closest allies are planning to infuse, quote, Christian nationalism and their ideas into that administration if, in fact, the former president secures a second term. These efforts are being spearheaded by a gentleman named Russell Vought. Not necessarily a household name, but someone who's important. He was Trump's former director of the Office of Management and Budget. Vought is now the president of something called the Center for Renewing America. It's a think tank. Alex Ward joins us now. He's a national security reporter with Politico. He is also the author of a brand new book just out this week, The Internationalists, The Fight to Restore American Foreign Policy After Trump. Alex, great to see you. Congratulations on the book. We'll get to that in a minute, I promise. What is your reporting on the intentions of Russell Vought and those around him and Christian nationalism and a potential second Trump term?
So Russell Vought, as you noted, runs the Center for Renewing America, and that is a Trump-aligned think tank. He's the former Office of Management and Budget Director, and Russ is part of this constellation of actors that are preparing Trump and everyone around him for a second term. Now, Russ is close to a bunch of so-called Christian nationalists who, most basically put, there's a lot of debate about it, but most basically put, are folks who believe that Christianity should infuse almost every aspect of public life. In other words, the religion is a major part of deciding which laws get passed, which laws should be considered.
And should inform policy.
Correct.
Whether it's regulatory policy, whether it's things that the government either incentivizes or disincentivizes. And there are all sorts of mechanisms by which the government at the federal level can do both.
Right. And that's right. And one thing that Russ has said explicitly is when considering someone's immigration status to the United States, they should think about whether or not they are a Christian or follow biblical teachings as opposed to where they come from or not. So this is something that CRA is working on. It is one of many bullet points that they've been thinking about. Others are invoking the Insurrection Act on day one or doing other interesting
Alex, I've also heard things that have come out from this think tank about divorce, about single motherhood, about contraception. What have you heard? What have you learned?
Yes, that's some of the things that they're interested in and that folks close to Russ are interested in. So one of them would be banning same-sex marriage. Others would be potentially ending access to contraceptives or ending abortion altogether. Another one that's become increasingly popular is ending no-fault divorce. So no couple is allowed to get divorced unless one can prove fault or cheating or something like that. Also, in one general thought that's been out there is having the government force fathers to take care of their children if they've proven to not do anything wrong necessarily. So it's a bit of an intrusion of government into personal life.
But it also sounds to me, Alex, like a kind of rewinding of the great reel of American nostalgia back to something around the early 20th century, or maybe even earlier than that.
Well, it's more in their mind. They will not say we're not trying to establish a theocracy. It's just that America is a Christian nation built on Christian values, right? Some of these folks would like to see the Ten Commandments in public schools, stuff like that. And so in this case, what they're thinking about is how can a Christian worldview inform public policy? And I should note, a Christian worldview is not partisan necessarily. There's a conservative view, a more centrist view, a liberal view. This is a strictly conservative, somewhat hardline conservative Christian view.
Now to your book. Are there any internationalists left in the Republican Party?
Yes, there are some. The question is, would they serve in a second Trump term? And it doesn't seem that likely. Perhaps a Robert O'Brien, who was the last national security advisor, he's still around. But mostly it is a lot of MAGA folks, more restrainers looking inward. Some would call them nationalists.
Is isolationist too strong a word to describe them in the Trump orbit?
Yes, it is, because they are still willing to do things in the world. For example, perhaps bombing Mexico, drug cartels in Mexico, going after terrorists abroad, just because they don't necessarily want to entangle America into foreign wars and necessarily get much closer to allies and have America do what it wants in the world, regardless of everyone else, doesn't necessarily mean that they are isolationist.
And from your research for the book, there's this conversation that you can be an internationalist and not be for lengthy entanglements of America and prolonged wars. You can be someone who's in favor of global alliances and shared values and not be for endless wars. But for the Trump MAGA wing, it's like, no. If you're for international alliances, you're probably for long-term, maybe open-ended wars.
Well, what in their mind it is, if you are for something that doesn't immediately benefit or seem to immediately benefit America first and foremost.
Transactional.
Exactly. It's very transactional. So even just Trump's discussions about NATO, right? if you are not paying enough for your own defense, then maybe America won't come to defend you if, say, Russia were to attack, even though you are a NATO ally and we are treaty bound to do so.
Taking the orientation toward international assistance, which has long been given as a gift or an aid from the United States as a loan. Well, you got to pay it back. Maybe not immediately, maybe not on really tough terms, but you got to pay it back. Changing that orientation.
Absolutely. And actually, I've talked to Lindsey Graham about this, who has been a proponent of it. And when he's talked to me, he said, actually, this is a way you get people to be involved in international politics because, right, every Americans understand you give a loan, you get it paid back. Well, if people are unhappy that we give loans to certain countries and they don't see any immediate benefit, well, they'll see the immediate benefit of getting that money back at some unidentified future date. Now, you'll have others say, no, that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because America needs its money back.
And I've heard this on Capitol Hill many times. Why do we give money to people who hate us? This idea of we're just sort of suckers. And former President Trump plays on that idea that if we're giving out this money, somehow we're losing in the transaction.
Right. I mean, in Trump's worldview, anything that doesn't seem like America gets the ultimate benefit is wrong. Some would question his views on this. I mean, it is true that we've given foreign aid and done to some entities that have not gone to our benefit. It is true that we've done some stupid stuff in the world. But some would say Trump misses that you give aid to certain places so that people have better lives. That country does better overall, and that becomes a more peaceful place that maybe America doesn't have to worry about down the line.
The long-term benefits, many have argued, Republican, Democrat, and others, that soft power can be not only persuasive, but valuable over the horizon. Alex Ward, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.